Hey, I never thought I'd be posting something like this, but here I am. Yes, when your entire life implodes, there's nowhere left to go but the internet. Maybe writing it all out will help. Maybe it won't. Who knows? My name's Daniel. I'm 52, and up until 2 weeks ago, I thought I had a good life. Not perfect, of course, but solid. A marriage spanning almost 3 decades, 2 kids who grew up into decent adults, a career that kept food on the table and let me retire early. I thought I had it all figured out. Turns out, I was an idiot. It started small. A shift, a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. My wife, Julia, was acting different. We'd been together since she was 21 and I was 24, back when we had nothing but an apartment that smelled like mildew and a mattress on the floor. We built everything together: careers, a home, a life. Our kids, Emily, 26, and Rachel, 23, were our pride and joy. Or at least, I thought they were. Julia was always the planner, the one who made sure birthdays were remembered, that the fridge was stocked, that Christmas looked like a damn magazine cover. She was predictable in a comforting way. And then, about a year ago, that predictability started slipping. She started going out more. Girls' nights, she called them, with Emily and Rachel. At first, I thought it was sweet. They were close, always had been, so I was happy they were keeping the bond strong. But then the frequency increased. Once a month turned into once a week, then twice. And Julia, who used to text me updates, little things like Emily tried a new wine and hated it, or Rachel almost burned down the kitchen trying to make souffle, stopped sharing details. When I asked about it, I got vague answers. Oh, just dinner. Catching up. Then there was her phone. We never had privacy rules. We knew each other's passwords. If mine was charging, I'd grab hers to check the time. If she was cooking, she'd use mine to play music. No big deal. Until it was. One night, I was sitting on the couch when her phone buzzed next to me. Just out of habit, I glanced over. The screen was face up, and a text popped up from a name I didn't recognize. Can't wait to see you again. That was it. 5 words. But my stomach twisted so fast I felt nauseous. I picked up the phone. I wasn't trying to snoop, but instincts kicked in. Before I could even unlock it, Julia practically vaulted over the couch and snatched it from my hands. What the hell? I asked, genuinely startled. Don't go through my phone, Daniel. We're not teenagers. Since when do we have phone boundaries? I almost said it, but something about the way she was gripping it, like it held nuclear codes, made my throat go dry. I let it go. Maybe it was a wrong number. Maybe I was overreacting. But things kept adding up. She started dressing differently. Nothing drastic, just new. Clothes she'd never worn before, makeup when she usually couldn't be bothered, perfume I hadn't smelled on her in years. She joined a gym. Trying to stay active, she said. Then came the bracelet. A delicate silver thing with a tiny charm. When I asked, she smiled and said, "It's just something I bought myself. A little treat." I should have pushed harder. Should have asked why she suddenly needed to treat herself after 28 years of marriage. But I didn't. Because I trusted her. Because I was an idiot. The breaking point came when I caught a lie. A big one. Julia told me she was spending the weekend visiting her sister, Claire, a few towns over. I thought nothing of it. A couple of days later, Emily and I were chatting on the phone, just casual talk, when she mentioned something that made my pulse skip. "Mom got such a nice tan," she said offhandedly. I frowned. A tan? It's February. There was a tiny pause. Oh, yeah, she went to one of those tanning places before her trip. Something about the hesitation in her voice made my blood run cold. I didn't say anything then. But later that night, when Julia came home, I noticed something I hadn't before. The soft glow of sun-kissed skin. A tan. From a trip to see her sister in a place that had been covered in snow for weeks. My brain kept trying to make excuses. Maybe she had gone tanning before the trip. Maybe she'd just been inside more than usual and I hadn't noticed before she left. But my gut knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to accept it. Yet, I couldn't sleep that night. My brain kept running through everything, connecting dots I'd refused to acknowledge before. The late nights. The guarded phone. The lies that, at the time, seemed small but now loomed over me like flashing warning signs. I told myself I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable evidence before I let my suspicions get the better of me. Because what if I was wrong? What if I confronted Julia and she had a perfectly reasonable explanation? But my gut already knew the answer. I started paying attention. Real attention. Julia wasn't careful anymore. Maybe she thought I was too oblivious. Maybe she'd gotten comfortable in her deception. Either way, I didn't have to dig too hard. Her schedule was consistent. Wednesday nights were her usual girls' night, with Emily and Rachel. That night, I told her I was working late. She barely looked up from her phone. "All right, don't wait up," she said. The moment she left, I got in my car and drove across town to the restaurant where Emily and Rachel usually met her. I parked across the street, watching the entrance like some cheap detective in a bad crime movie. 15 minutes passed. 20. Then I saw them, Emily and Rachel, laughing as they stepped inside. No Julia. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to believe it. So I checked the tracker app on our phones. Years ago, we'd installed it for safety, something we both agreed on after a friend of ours had a medical emergency while traveling alone. Julia's location popped up instantly. She wasn't with Emily and Rachel. She was across town, at an upscale Italian place. A place we used to go for anniversaries. My stomach twisted. I told myself to drive home, to sit with this information, think it through. But my body was already moving. Before I knew it, I was pulling into the restaurant parking lot. I didn't even have to go inside. Through the large glass windows, I spotted her instantly. She wasn't alone. She was sitting across from a man, her boss, Mark. I recognized him from a few company parties, back when Julia actually invited me to them. He was leaning in close, his hand resting on hers across the table. I watched in silence as Julia laughed at something he said, her head tilting back slightly, her fingers grazing his wrist. It was subtle, intimate, the kind of thing you wouldn't think twice about if you didn't know what you were looking at. But I knew. And then she leaned in, pressing her lips to his. I barely registered pulling out my phone and snapping pictures. My hands were shaking, but I kept taking them. Proof. Evidence. My goddamn reality documented frame by frame. I didn't storm in. Didn't make a scene. What would be the point? Instead, I opened our family group chat, the one with me, Julia, Emily, Rachel, and a handful of extended relatives. The one Julia used to post cheesy vacation pictures in. I attached the photos. My heart was pounding as I typed the message. "Hope you're having a great dinner, Julia. Looks like Mark is enjoying it too." I hit send. And then I left. My phone started vibrating immediately. Emily. Then Rachel. Then my sister. My mother. My cousin. I ignored them all. I drove. I don't even remember where. Just that my hands felt numb on the wheel and my chest felt hollow. By the time I got home, they were all there, Julia, Emily, Rachel, waiting for me in the living room. "Dad, what the hell was that?" Emily demanded, standing with her arms crossed. I didn't answer. Just walked past her, sat down on the recliner, and exhaled slowly. Julia's face was pale. "Who sent you those pictures?" I let out a laugh. A bitter, humorless thing. "You think that matters?" Rachel was already crying. Emily, always the composed one, was still in defense mode. "You ambushed Mom in the group chat like that?" "Really?" I turned my gaze to her, and for the first time in my life, I saw my daughter not as my little girl but as someone I didn't recognize. "How long?" I asked. My voice was quiet, controlled. Julia swallowed hard, staring at the floor. "How long?" I repeated, my patience hanging by a thread. 13 months, she whispered. I gritted my teeth. "And you too." I turned to Emily and Rachel. "How long have you been covering for her?" Rachel broke down completely, covering her face with her hands. Emily didn't flinch. She met my stare, her expression unreadable. "Dad, it's not that simple." "It's the simplest thing in the world," I shot back. "You either knew, or you didn't. And judging by your reaction, you knew." Emily took a slow breath. "Mom made a mistake." My chest tightened. "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "She was unhappy," Emily continued. "You were always so busy with work. Always gone. Always." I shot up from my chair so fast it nearly tipped over. "Do not put this on me." Rachel sobbed harder. Julia just stood there, silent, letting our daughter fight her battle for her. "You all lied to me," I said, my voice shaking. "For over a year. You sat across from me at dinner, laughed with me, celebrated birthdays with me, while knowing." "Dad," Rachel choked out. "I want you all out of this house." My voice was barely above a whisper, but it was the loudest thing I'd ever said. Julia's head snapped up. "Daniel, let's get out." Rachel looked at me like I'd physically hit her. Emily narrowed her eyes. "You're seriously doing this? You seriously thought I wouldn't?" Julia tried again. "Let's talk." There's nothing left to talk about. Emily scoffed. You're just throwing away 30 years over one mistake? I shook my head slowly. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that. Julia opened her mouth, but I was done. I turned my back to them and walked away. The last thing I heard before the door closed behind them was Rachel's sobs and Emily whispering something to Julia. Something that sounded like, he'll calm down. Give it time. But I knew the truth. There was no coming back from this. The house was silent. Too silent. For nearly 30 years, this place had been filled with life, laughter, arguments, movie nights, birthdays, and holidays. Now, it was just walls and echoes. I sat in the recliner for hours, staring at nothing. My mind felt like a broken record, replaying every memory, every conversation, every moment I should have seen it. How many times had I been sitting in this very chair, believing my family was intact while they were laughing behind my back? The betrayal wasn't just Julia's affair. It was Emily and Rachel, my own daughters, choosing to cover for her. That was the knife in my back I couldn't pull out. Eventually, exhaustion won out. I fell asleep right there, fully clothed, with my phone buzzing beside me. Messages. Missed calls. More than I could count. I didn't answer a single one. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Julia. Julia, we need to talk. Face to face. Just us. I stared at the message, my pulse steady, my anger cold. She didn't deserve a response. But I wanted answers. So I agreed. We met at a coffee shop near her office. Public, neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, her fingers wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. She looked tired. Not like someone who had lost sleep over guilt, but like someone who was inconvenienced. I sat down without a word. Daniel, she said softly. Talk, I said. She took a deep breath. I never wanted you to find out like that. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, so I was supposed to never find out? She winced. That's not what I meant. I leaned forward, my voice low. Then tell me, Julia. What did you mean? She looked down at her coffee. It started as a mistake. Something I never thought would happen. Mark and I were working late. Things just happened. I clenched my jaw. 13 months worth of mistakes? She sighed. I was lonely, Daniel. You were always busy. Always working. And the girls, they just wanted to protect me. They didn't mean to hurt you. I felt my blood pressure spike. They protected you? From what? From accountability? From consequences? From losing everything, she whispered. I thought if I could just figure things out, if I could find a way to end it quietly, we wouldn't have to be here. Here, I repeated. You mean the part where you ruined our marriage? The part where I can't even look at our daughters without wondering who they really are. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't buy it. Not anymore. You chose this, I said, voice like steel. You chose him. You chose to lie. And when you got caught, you chose to let Emily and Rachel cover for you. I love you, she said suddenly. I blinked. Then I laughed. Hard. A bitter, broken laugh. You don't love me, Julia. You love comfort. You love the life I built for you. But me? You killed at the moment you looked me in the eyes and lied. She sniffled, her fingers tightening around the cup. So, what happens now? I met her gaze, unwavering. I want a divorce. No discussion. No second chances. You'll get whatever the court says you're entitled to and not a cent more. And if you think you're keeping the house, you're delusional. Her face crumpled. Daniel, please. I stood up. We're done, Julia. I walked out without looking back. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I wasn't naive enough to think Julia would just roll over and accept the divorce quietly. No, I knew exactly what was coming. The manipulation, the guilt trips, the desperate attempts to salvage what she had left. And I was right. The very next day, she showed up at the house. I heard the knocking, but I didn't move. I let her pound on the door for a full 5 minutes before I finally opened it. Her face was blotchy, eyes red. She must have been crying. Or pretending to. Daniel, please, she said, voice trembling. We need to talk. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. We already did. She wiped at her eyes. Not like this. You can't just throw everything away over one mistake. There it was again. Mistake. Like she had tripped and fallen into her boss's arms. My patience snapped. It wasn't one mistake, Julia. It was 13 months of choices. 13 months of sneaking around, lying to my face, using our daughters to cover your tracks. She flinched, but quickly recovered. I know I hurt you, but you didn't just hurt me. I cut in. You destroyed our family. You turned our daughters into liars. And now you want to stand here and act like I'm the one overreacting." Her jaw tightened. "I never asked them to lie for me." I barked out a humorless laugh. "You didn't have to. They knew. And they still chose to protect you. Not me. Not the man who sacrificed everything for this family." She shifted on her feet, dropping the pity act. "So that's it. You're just cutting them out of your life too." I stared at her, a dull ache spreading through my chest. "I don't know yet." Rachel had been sending texts, long-winded apologies filled with regret and guilt. I hadn't responded. Emily, on the other hand, was a different story. She had doubled down. "Emily, you need to stop acting like the victim, Dad. Mom's human. She made a mistake. You should be working through this, not tearing the family apart." She didn't get it. And maybe she never would. Julia sighed. "I know you're angry, but I love you, Daniel. I still love you." I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I had spent my entire adult life with. The mother of my children. The person I had trusted more than anyone in the world. And I felt nothing. No love. No longing. Just a hollow, empty space where my marriage used to be. "I don't love you anymore," I said simply. "You killed that." Her breath hitched. "Please, don't do this." I stepped back and shut the door in her face. I waited for the sound of footsteps retreating, for the sobs. But there was nothing. Just silence. A few days later, the divorce papers were filed. I had a good lawyer, someone who wasn't going to let Julia walk away with more than she deserved. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Emily called me late that night. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then another. Finally, I picked up. "Emily, what?" "You need to fix this," she shouted, her voice laced with panic. I frowned. "Fix what?" She hesitated, then finally said, "Mom's engagement." I went still. "Come again." Emily's breath was shaky. "She and Mark are engaged. She told me tonight. They're already talking about a wedding. It's like she doesn't even care about what she did to you. Like none of this even matters." My stomach turned, but I kept my voice even. "And why is that my problem?" "Because she's still your wife." "Not for long." Emily was silent for a moment. Then she whispered, "I thought she was just going through something. That she'd come back. But now I don't know." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Emily, listen to me. Your mother made her choice. And you made yours when you lied to me. Dad, please. I need time." She let out a choked sob. "So that's it. You're just done with us." I hesitated. Then, finally, I said, "I don't know." And I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time after that, staring at nothing. I had no idea what to do. But one thing was certain. Julia had moved on. And now, so would I? The days blurred together after that. Work, home, sleep, repeat. My phone kept buzzing, but I ignored most of it. Julia had stopped trying to talk to me directly, shifting instead to legal demands through her lawyer. She wanted half of everything. The house, my savings, even a portion of my retirement fund. I wasn't surprised. Emily, meanwhile, sent long texts filled with rationalizations, trying to get me to see the bigger picture. That it wasn't all black and white. That love is complicated. I stopped reading them. Rachel was different. She kept her messages short. "Rachel, Dad, please talk to me. Rachel, I know I messed up. I don't know how to fix this. Rachel, I miss you." I never responded. Then, one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello. Mr. Carter?" a hesitant male voice asked. "Yeah. Who's this?" There was a pause. Then, "It's Ethan. I'm not sure if you remember me." I sat up straighter. "Emily's fiancé." "Yeah," he exhaled. "Well, ex-fiancé now." That caught my attention. "What happened?" There was another pause. I wanted to talk to you. I found something out, and I think you should know." "Go on." Emily told me everything about the affair. But she made it seem like you were overreacting, like it was some short fling Mom had, and you went nuclear for no reason. But something didn't sit right with me. I gritted my teeth. And I checked her phone. My pulse quickened. I found messages between her and Julia, planning how to manipulate you, how to make you feel guilty enough to pay for the wedding. They had this whole strategy, guilt-tripping you, making mutual friends pressure you, even using Rachel to soften you up. Julia told her, "Don't worry, he'll break eventually." My blood ran cold. "You should also know," Ethan continued, "that Emily's been spending a lot of time with Mark. Not just Julia him. She's calling him her bonus dad. She's letting him pay for the wedding now that you won't. I swallowed hard. You probably already knew, but I figured you deserved to hear it from someone who wasn't trying to manipulate you. I let out a slow breath. Thanks, Ethan. And I'm sorry. For what? For you getting tangled up in this mess. He chuckled dryly. Honestly, I'm grateful. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. After we hung up, I sat in silence, gripping my phone. Emily hadn't just offended Julia. She hadn't just lied to me. She had used me. And suddenly, all my doubts vanished. I knew what I had to do. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning. I want to change my will, I said. Julia gets nothing beyond what's legally required. And I want both Emily and Rachel removed as beneficiaries. My lawyer hesitated. Are you sure? 100%. I finalized it that afternoon. Later that night, my phone rang. Rachel. Again. This time, I picked up. Dad? She breathed. You finally. I changed my will today, I interrupted. You and Emily are out of it. Dead silence. Then, a choked whisper. You, what? You heard me. You made your choices. Now I've made mine. Her breath hitched. Dad, no please. I know I messed up, but I didn't do what Emily did. I wasn't part of that. Did you cover for your mother? I asked, voice cold. She hesitated. Did you lie to my face? A quiet sob. Yes, but... Then it's done. She was crying now. Dad, please. I love you. I didn't know how to handle it. I was scared. I exhaled, my chest tight. Rachel, I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. And that's not something that can be fixed overnight. More sobs. Finally, she whispered. So that's it? We're just over. I swallowed hard. I don't know. Then I hung up. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. I wasn't angry anymore. Just done. The silence in my house felt different now. It wasn't empty. It wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. I had spent so many years pouring everything I had into my family, believing I was building something unbreakable. But in the end, it had all been built on sand. Julia had made her choices. Emily had made hers. Even Rachel, who at least had the decency to feel guilty, had still played her part. And now, I had finally made mine. But life has a way of testing your resolve. A week after I changed my will, Rachel showed up at my doorstep. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair unkempt, like she hadn't slept in days. She stood there for a long time before she spoke. I hate her. I blinked. Excuse me. She swallowed hard. Mom. I hate her. I sighed, already tired. Rachel. No, listen, she interrupted. I confronted her about Mark. About how fast she moved on. About how she lied to all of us. And you know what she said? I waited. She told me to grow up, Rachel whispered. Told me I needed to stop being dramatic and get with the program. Like none of this even mattered. Like she didn't even care that she broke everything. I studied her face. And Emily? Rachel let out a hollow laugh. She's too far gone. She's practically glued to Mom and Mark now. Calls him Dad, like you never even existed. She actually told me I needed to stop whining and start supporting their wedding plans. Can you believe that? I could. Rachel looked at me, her eyes red. I don't want anything to do with them. But I don't want to lose you too. My chest ached, but I kept my expression unreadable. Rachel, I appreciate you telling me this. But this isn't something you can fix overnight. I know. You broke my trust. I know, she repeated, voice breaking. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I need time. She nodded quickly. Take all the time you need. I'll prove it to you, Dad. I swear. For the first time in months, I saw a glimmer of hope. But hope wasn't enough. Not yet. That night, I got another call. This time, it was Ethan. You were right, he said, skipping the pleasantries. About what? Emily. She reached out to me today, saying she made a huge mistake and wanted another chance. Told me she was just caught up in the drama and didn't realize what she had until it was gone. I smirked. And I told her to go to hell. I chuckled, a genuine laugh for the first time in a long time. Smart man. Yeah, Ethan sighed. Guess I learned that from you. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet and let the moment sink in. Julia was gone. Emily was gone. Rachel? Maybe. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. I felt free. And I wasn't going to waste it. 5 months. That's how long it took for me to rebuild my life. To scrape myself off the floor, to cut away the rot. To stop looking over my shoulder for a family that had already abandoned me long before I ever realized it. The divorce was finalized last month. Julia fought hard for more than she deserved, but my lawyer was better. She got some money, her car, but not the house, not my retirement. She and Mark got married 2 weeks after the ink dried on our divorce papers. A real classy move. I didn't care. I sold the house. Too many ghosts, too many memories, both good and bad. I bought a smaller place in a different part of town, closer to work. It wasn't anything special, but it was mine. No betrayals, no lies. Just mine. Emily didn't reach out after I cut her from my will. I expected as much. Rachel, though, she tried. And I let her. She showed up again a month after our last conversation. No grand speech, no dramatics. Just an apology. No excuses. No blaming. Just a quiet, exhausted, I messed up, and I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. And that, I could work with. We're not the same as we were before. I don't know if we ever will be, but I'm giving her a chance. One chance. I met someone new. Her name's Jess. I wasn't looking for anything, wasn't expecting anything, but life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. She understands betrayal. Her ex cheated on her with her sister, so if anyone gets what I've been through, it's her. We're taking it slow, but for the first time in a long time, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Hope. I ran into Ethan at a sports bar last week. He's doing well, moved on, met someone new. You saved me from the biggest mistake of my life, he told me. You taught me about self-respect, about not letting people treat you like I don't matter. That meant more than I expected. Last week, I finalized my new will. Everything goes to my brother and his kids now. And I set up a small scholarship fund at the local community college for students in the construction management program. Figured if I'm going to invest in someone, it might as well be kids who actually appreciate the opportunity. People ask me if I regret cutting Emily out of my life. My answer is always the same. Family isn't just about blood. It's about trust. And the people who broke mine don't deserve a place in my life anymore. This isn't the life I planned, but it's a good one, an honest one, and that's worth more than any family built on lies.